Welcome to the Carriker Chronicles, the People Show. Checking the Pulse of Husker Nation, brought to you by DPS Concrete Construction. Ladies and gentlemen, today's show is 3 things Nebraska can learn from the national championship game last night between Michigan and Washington. Also, Frank Solich, my former coach. I might share a story at the end of this show about my former coach who's going to the College Football Hall of Fame. Also, Danny Woodhead, a guy who wishes he was as good at golf as I am. We might discuss that later as well. First, all right, if you're happy for Coach Solich and Danny Woodhead going into the College Football Hall of Fame, hit that subscribe button. Sign stealing gate aside, also, all right, big boy football. We used to call it putting on your big boy pads. If you believe running the ball and playing good defense is still the best way to win football games and or championships, then smash that like button. Now, here are the 3 things that I believe Nebraska can learn from the national championship game last night. Number 1, games are still won and lost in the game of football in the trenches. All right, here's some stats for you fine folks at home. Now, Michigan had 443 total yards of offense. Washington, 301 yards of total offense. Michigan had more rush yards than Washington had total yards. Michigan had 303 rush yards in the game. Washington only had 46 yards rushing. I said they had to be balanced. If you listen to me on 93.7 The Ticket or the Big Ten Show, I said Washington's got to be balanced. They were not balanced at all. All right, Michigan averaged 8 yards per rush. Washington, 2.3 yards per rush. Now, the Wolverines running back, Blake Corum, was the leading rusher, had 21 carries, 134 rush yards on the day, and 2 touchdowns. Now, next in line was Donovan Edwards, who had the 2 long touchdown runs to start off the game. All right, 6 carries, 104 yards rushing, 2 touchdowns. And I forgot to put the yards per carry, but if I remember right from when I looked at the computer screen right before I did this show, I think it was about 17 yards per carry. All right, Washington's leading rusher, he only averaged 3 yards per carry, and his longest run for the whole night was a whopping 7 yards. All right. Now, here's the deal. I'm not saying you have to be able to pass the ball. You have to be able to be balanced, but Michigan was so good at running the ball, frankly, for the past 3 years, but especially last night. They didn't get much out of their quarterback when it came to throwing the ball. He had a couple of runs, actually, but Michigan's quarterback, J.J. McCarthy, completed barely over 50% of his passes for only 140 yards and no touchdown passes. Now, it's a tale as old as time, ladies and gentlemen. You can tell your kids tonight when you're putting them down to bed and you're telling them a bedtime story. The more physical team will always have the advantage in football. Now, they're basically trying to eliminate, hard hits, and it seems just taking any sort of hitting out of football in general, especially with some of these ridiculous roughing the passer calls that you see on Sundays. Don't get me started. All right, they're basically trying to get out of football right now. But until they take hitting, blocking, tackling out of football, the more physical team will always have a huge advantage in the game of football. Basically, at the end of the day, football is still about blocking and tackling. And the team that blocks and tackles better every time have a huge advantage over the other team. Unless the other team is just straight up 22 athletes across the board on offense and defense, and they're just straight up way more athletic across the board on their 22 players, 11 on offense, 11 on defense. Okay, now, talent acquisition matters, okay? But bear with me for a minute. Michigan's recruiting the last 4 years is an average of 12th in the country. Over the last 4 years, they averaged the 12th best recruiting class in the country. Not first, not national championship, not top 5, not even top 10, but bear with me. On the other hand, Ohio State has had a top 5 recruiting class or better every single year. In fact, their average class recruiting rank was 3.75, so 3rd or 4th in the country every year. Alabama, who Michigan just beat in the Rose Bowl, and let's be very clear, Alabama's got a great program. I'm not ignoring that. That'd be ridiculous. But their class average is either 1st or 2nd in the country over the last 4 years. It's exactly 1.5. It's basically them or Georgia. They have a great program. But again, Michigan was able to find a way to beat them. And frankly, they were clearly the better team. Michigan almost gave the game to Alabama. All right, Nebraska, just so you know, the last 4 years, they've had 2 top 20 classes and 3 top 25 classes. Obviously, we know how that's played out. Just some info to put out there. Now, they've beaten Ohio State, as we know, 3 years in a row. Michigan has. Okay, and in those games, Michigan has averaged 235 rush yards per game. Ohio State only 104. The Wolverines are averaging over 6 yards per carry the past 3 years against the Buckeyes. The Buckeyes are averaging 3.6 yards per carry against the Wolverines. And in the second half of those 6 games, Michigan has outscored Ohio State 72-31, more than a 2-1 difference. And last year's game was actually close. It came down to the wire. The score was only 30-24. Michigan still scored on 6 of their last 7 possessions in that ball game, and they had the ball for over 10 minutes in the fourth quarter. Now, don't get me wrong. Talent acquisition, as I mentioned, is absolutely one of the most important things you need to do if you're going to have a good football team, program, and try to win some games. But what you do with that talent matters the most, in my humble opinion. Now, side note, okay, the Buckeyes currently have 5 five-star players in their recruiting class, the 2024 recruiting class. Michigan has 0. And I'm just curious to see how that plays out over time. By the way, the only other Big Ten team that currently has a 5-star signee right now is Nebraska. Just throwing that out there. All right. Now, I didn't really address the transfer portal, and that's a huge part of college football. They need to make some changes, adjustments. It's the Wild West, show for another day. I didn't address it or talk about it, okay? And Michigan's done some things in the transfer portal, just not a ton. Okay, the second thing I believe Nebraska can learn from the national championship game, a good defense will still stump a good offense, especially in a big game situation. Here are some of the stats coming into the game, and I was so intrigued to watch this matchup. Okay, Washington had the number 1 pass offense in the country, averaging 350 yards per game, the top-ranked passing quarterback in the country. Okay, Michael Penix Jr. had thrown for 4,648 yards this season, the most in America. Okay, Washington had the 10th-ranked scoring offense in the country, 38 points per game, and the number 11 team passing efficiency on offense as well. Michigan's defense, number 1 scoring defense, number 1 total defense, number 2 pass defense in the country. Okay, and the number 3 pass efficiency defense in the country. I wanted to see that matchup, and we saw what happened, ladies and gentlemen. A defense will 99 times out of 100, or at least 19 out of 20 times, 95% of the time, have the advantage in a big game scenario over an offense. You look at some of Washington's stats, and they got the best wide receiver trio in America. They got the best passing quarterback in America. Their offensive line won the award for the best offensive line in the country. By the way, Michigan had won it the 2 previous years, and Alabama the 2 previous years before that. This was a almost 2019 LSU-esque offense coming into the game. Not after the game, though, due to good Michigan defense. Michael Penix Jr., 27-61 on the day, completing only 53% of his passes, 255 yards, only averaged 5 yards of completion. That's a season low for him. 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. And here's how Michigan did it, by getting pressure with the front 4. Now, they blitzed sometimes, but they got pressure with the front 4. And they were hitting Michael Penix, and they were beating him up, okay? It's the most beat up I've seen a quarterback since New Year's Day 1995. Frank Costa versus Nebraska. When Penix was walking off the field and walking around the field like he was 85 years old, and I'm not trying to make fun of him, that's just what he looked like, I hearkened back to Frank Costa. That's immediately what I thought of. Okay. The other guy that I thought of was Tom Brady, who's the GOAT, obviously. I know some people aren't fans, show for another day, but he is the GOAT in my opinion. But a couple times he lost in the Super Bowl, the Giants got after him with 4-man rushes, and that kind of comes back to the trenches as well. But here's the deal. Okay, there were some open wide receivers that Michael Penix missed, which he never does. There were some drop balls from Washington's receivers, which doesn't happen. There was also some questionable calls in the game, but that's what happens when you're playing a good, physical, smash-mouth defense. Mistakes happen. Crazy things happen that usually don't happen to a very good offense. All right, and with one exception, Michigan tackled really well the whole night. Again, blocking and tackling, ladies and gentlemen. I forgot to mention, Michigan outscored Washington 14-0 in the fourth quarter, and that's really what put the game away. Now, congrats to Washington on a great season. Phenomenal. They exceeded all expectations. Now, real quick, as you know, this show is brought to you by DPS Concrete Construction. If you're a general contractor, building owner, a property manager looking for concrete repair or work done in the Omaha metro area, such as street paving, building floors, and parking lots, check out dpsconstruction.net. The third thing that I think Nebraska can learn from the national title game is find your identity and be who you are. Michigan is the same team that Stanford was when Harbaugh was there. Stanford had a couple of players, but they weren't uber talented, yet they were a top 5 team. Most of the time, top 10 while he was there. They struggled with Oregon a bit. When he went to the Niners, they're the same team that he coached at the Niners. Bring in a bunch of tight ends, run the football, put offensive linemen at tight ends, run the football, overload right, overload left. I played against those teams. They were the most physical team we'd play every year was the Niners. I watched Michigan put an offensive lineman in motion last night for the kick-out block. That's scary. It's also awesome. All right, see if I can find my spot here. Now, different teams win different ways. Okay, different teams have won championships with different styles. What I'm saying is we got to find who we are and get really good at it. The black shirts know who they are. And I thought we kind of knew who we were on offense at the start of the year, last year for Nebraska. I felt like it changed throughout the season. They were trying to figure it out. Now there's a notable shift in the type of quarterback that we're recruiting, more of a pocket type quarterback. And that's cool with me. Whatever. Okay? But let's figure out exactly who we are and get really good at that. All right, ladies and gentlemen, my former coach, Frank Solich, the man that recruited me, the man that I committed to play for, is going into the College Football Hall of Fame. I want to give him a shout out. Congratulations. I will never forget when him and Coach Darlington came to my parents' house. I was in charge of dinner every Sunday night growing up in high school. I always made breakfast for dinner, and I made him a big breakfast plate, and they both looked at me like I was crazy, almost like I was poisoning the food. I don't think they thought I could cook. I can actually cook breakfast really, really well. I'll never forget the look they gave me sitting at my mom and dad's table like, is this safe to eat? Both of them. It was funny. All right, and actually the first dinner I ever made for myself, I was out of the dorm, so it was going into my redshirt freshman year. I just moved into the house in the summer. It was either 3 or 4 dozen pieces of bacon. It was delicious, and I think I took 10 years off my life when I did that. And the players at Nebraska thought so highly of Coach Solich. And when he was let go, and I talked about this way in the past years ago, we had a players-only meeting and just about didn't play in that upcoming bowl game. That's how much his players, some of us loved him. Now, obviously, we ended up playing in the bowl game. All right, Danny Woodhead, Shadron State running back, 2004 to 2007, 10-year NFL vet, 2-time winner of the Harlem Hill Trophy. That's the award given to the most valuable player in Division II football, is going into the College Football Hall of Fame as well. Now, the dude was beyond good, okay? Check this out. Congratulations, Danny, okay? Barry Sanders is the only college football player to accumulate more all-purpose yards in a season than Woodhead did in 2006. Now, I went golfing a few years ago before the spring game with Danny and Larry the Cable Guy and myself, and there's one other individual there. I've shared this story with other people before. He's not great either, and I don't want to embarrass him again because I got a text the next day. Let's just say I'm almost as bad as he was, almost. Danny and Larry, Dan Whitney, Larry the Cable Guy, are avid golfers. Let's just say I am not. Oh, my Lord. And it definitely showed up that day. All right, ladies and gentlemen, got some questions for you fine folks at home. All right, number 1, does sign stealing taint Michigan's national championship? Let me know in the comments below. Number 2, do you like that the college football playoff is going to 12? Yes or no? Let me know. And if you just want to show some love to Coach Solich and Danny Woodhead in the comments below, just simply type in congratulations. And I'm going to be putting out an interview this Thursday at noon. Tune in to see who it is. And you can always go check out CarrikerChronicles.com. It's where all your football hopes and dreams will come true. Rob Zadiska, Corn Craze, John Johnston, a whole bunch of stuff. Go big, Red Nose. Remember to throw the bug.